From Hollywood, it's Paranormal Tonight. I'm Mark Summers, and now, here's your host, Dan Harary.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Live from Hollywood. It's Paranormal Tonight. I'm Dan Harary, broadcasting live in color from beautiful downtown Beverly Hills, California. For all my friends who were affected by the fires, I hope you're safe and well now. Several of my friends had to evacuate, but I believe they're back in their homes. There's a new fire happening out in Santa Clarita, which is north of LA proper, but still a little bit too close. And the air quality in LA is not very good. It smells like there's a fireplace outside when you walk your dog, which I do every day. So my best wishes to all of us who are living through this fire era in Los Angeles. I've never seen anything like it. I've been here 44 years. I've never seen anything like this before. Hopefully everyone will get their act together. Last week, I had a guest I was hoping to talk to. He used to work where my dad worked at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. He knows a lot of the secrets there at that Army base. But alas, my friend Joe Foster had technical issues on his end that Race and I, my producer, we couldn't resolve them in time. So unfortunately, we didn't get that show up live last week. Perhaps I will try again with him maybe sometime over the summer. I have a very special guest tonight, and she's someone I've wanted to talk to for a while. I read her book, which we will discuss at length, and I recommend this book. Man, this is a hell of a book. Earth's Secret Visitors, Are They Here to Help Us? This is a great book. But anyway, here we go. Lisa Nelson is the author of the book, Earth's Secret Visitors, Are They Here to Help Us? The book recounts her story, which started in the early 1970s. In her hometown near Chicago, she was 15, and she met a boy named Rob in high school who she began to date. Rob began to detail to Lisa his secret life of involvement with alien beings or interdimensional beings who were visiting Earth in hopes of curbing the Cold War of the 1970s and 80s. These beings used remarkable means of operating invisibly within the Earth's realm. The ETs told Lisa that her boyfriend Rob was a very old warrior living discreetly on Earth and saying he had been regenerated time and time again. Lisa's reaction from the beginning had been skepticism, and she feared that perhaps her boyfriend Rob might even have mental illness. So again, we'll be getting into Rob and the book at great length as soon as I stop babbling right here. Separately, Lisa has worked for over 20 years in the entertainment industry and the management of major celebrities. She's raised 2 successful daughters and has become a masterful energy healer. Lisa practices energy medicine via long distance with clients around the world, certified through the Healing Touch program. In June, a few months from now, in June, she will graduate from a 4-year accredited program with the Brennan School of Healing Sciences. Lisa enjoys assisting ET experiencers with various issues which can be brought on by mind-bending experiences like she's had. And also, Lisa is a founding member of my group that I created 2 years ago with Steve Bassett called the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. That's enough of me talking. Race, let's bring in Lisa Nelson. Hi there.
Hi.
How did I do? Dan. How did I do, Lisa? Did I do okay?
You did good, Dan. No corrections.
Oh, that's great. That's great. You know, because sometimes
I had a crush on Rob from 8th grade and gave up on him after a couple of years, and then he noticed me.
And when he asked you, you were like, he was like, "Are you talking to me?" Like Robert De Niro. Are you right? Are you talking to me?
It.
Right?
Right.
Let me tell you a quick story. This has nothing to do with anything. I went to my 50th high school reunion in August in Asbury Park, New Jersey, my hometown. I had a crush on this girl named Amy in high school the whole time. She was the only girl in high school that had red hair, and I had a thing for red hair. She was a beautiful redhead in high school. Lisa, I never spoke to her once in high school. Never once ever did I even say hello, nothing. At the 50th anniversary reunion, I
She
bump
had a
into
crush on you the whole time.
I I bump into this woman. She has long white hair. She used to be a redhead, long white hair. And I look at her, and she looks at me, and I see her name tag, and it's this Amy. And I said, Amy? She goes, yeah. I go, do you remember me, Danny? I go, I had such a crush on you in high school. You can't believe it. She goes, oh, that's what all the guys are telling me here tonight. And then she just turned and walked away.
Oh,
But
no.
at least I spoke to her. I spoke to her before I died. So that was the goal.
Oh, that's like when I told Todd Rundgren that he changed the course of my life. He was not impressed.
I have a good friend who met his wife at a Todd Rundgren concert, and he actually changed the course of their lives. All right, so I loved your book. I think I read it twice, but I certainly read it at least once. This is a really interesting book, Lisa, and it's my joke about your book is if your stories aren't true, your creativity rivals Stephen King. So it's got to be real stuff there, you know.
There's nothing creative about it. That's what made it so hard, was if you say it in an elevator speech or very quickly, it comes across like a Marvel Comics plot. And when you get into the details, you discover the world that I was in. And that's why it had to be a book.
Oh yeah, it's remarkable. It should be a movie. It really should be a movie. Race, can we just put slide number 1 just for a second up there, so people can see? Yeah, I highly recommend this book. It's really good. Earth's Secret Visitors Out of Here Now. Okay, we could take that down, Race. Okay, Lisa, just real quick, just a little background. Where did you grow up? What did your parents do? And what were some of your interests as a child?
I grew up about 20 to 25 miles west of Chicago. In the beginning, we were rich with plenty of space long before all the cornfields were turned into strip malls, etc. My mother was a school teacher and then later worked in the middle school office. My father was an agricultural engineer.
Okay.
So he designed tractors, the International Harvester tractors.
Wow.
We grew up in a lovely neighborhood that remains close-knit to this day. Nobody's parents moved away. Nobody's parents got divorced. And we had cookouts and barbecues on all the major national holidays. And the neighborhood girls and I continued to get together as often as we can. My interests were music. I played the piano, didn't like it that much, and I begged my parents to take up the violin, which became a big deal for me as time went on. It led to going to music school.
I can see the violin in the background there. That's a beautiful instrument. So I have a funny little story. You told my friend Matt Barone when he interviewed you that you like the Beatles. You like the Beatles and the Monkees, but to you they were one and the same.
I couldn't tell the difference.
Well, for me, I like the Beatles. I was 7 when they came, but for the Monkees, Lisa, came when I was 10. And from 7 to 10, I played classical piano, and my parents made me, and I hated it. And then the Monkees, the very first episode of the Monkees came on NBC. I was 10. I saw the first episode. I fell in love with Mickey Dolenz, the drummer, on the show. I stood. Now I'm clairaudient, and this is a true story. Every 10 years, I get a message in my right ear. I heard, Danny, you got to play the drums, in my ear. So I got up and I told my parents, I go, I'm a drummer now. And they go, what are you talking about? I go, no, I just saw Mickey Dolenz. I'm a drummer now. I've been playing the drums ever since. And I was friends with Mickey Dolenz in the 80s. We used to have lunch together. Is that a great story?
That's fantastic. That's better than the clairaudient message I used to get, which saved my life, but it was always telling me to get a colonoscopy. And when I finally did, the GI physician told me it saved my life.
Oh my God, that's a good one.
Clairaudience
that's better. That's better than play the drums, Lisa. You win. That's way better than that. Okay,
I'd rather play the drums than do that.
Probably more fun. You also told Matt Barone that you read Chariots of the Gods when you were like 6th or 7th grade, and the ideas of UFOs fascinated you. And then a few years later, when you were 15, you started dating this fellow Rob in high school. He changed your life. Rob. Race, can we see slide number 2, please? That's Rob.
That's Rob at the age of 21.
Okay, so tell me about Rob.
Rob, from when I first saw him in 8th grade, he was very, very intelligent, athletic, tall, extremely intelligent, quite a vocabulary, extremely well read, and funny, a lot of personality. I think he was underserved in the public school system. He had an exceptional IQ. His father confirmed to me that it was 186, and I doubt that anything. We didn't have AP classes when I was going to high school.
Right. I'm sorry, Race, you can take that down now. Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That photo was taken by Robert Hastings in 1981.
I want to get to Robert a little bit later. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is like the Rob high school era, you know.
Rob high school, he was popular. I didn't think I had a chance with him because he was in sports. I wasn't sporty. So the cheerleaders were going to be in his circle. And that's the way it was until he spotted me in sophomore year. And that's why I couldn't believe it when he asked me to the homecoming. And
were you 15 at the time? Oh, you were 15. He was 15 also?
I was almost 15.
Oh, wow.
Really? I was on the young end of my school year. So sophomore year, I was 14 going on 15.
Okay.
So I rounded off and usually say 15 because we started dating just before. But it wasn't long before he started telling me the ways in which he was different. And it kind of shattered me a little bit because I thought I had finally had a dream come true, and now I thought I was pondering whether this person had some serious issues.
Right. Well, along the way, I mean, Rob was telling you that he was interacting with, or he himself was extraterrestrial or interdimensional, and you learned about these entities and beings through your relationship with Rob. So tell us about that, and who are Rob's guardians?
I was introduced gradually. I think there were a number of things that took me time to get used to. Number one was this idea that he had introduced the idea of having contact through describing to me that his parents had been abducted and that he had never seen them again and was consequently adopted. His whole family always said that he was because he didn't look like them too much.
Okay.
He started to interact with them on a regular basis, and I was skeptical because I wasn't seeing anything in particular until it was introduced to me that he would be being lifted up to a craft and simultaneously replaced by a holographic projection. At the time, human technology, as far as holographs went, was very rudimentary still. But he said it would be impossible to see the switch, and so they agreed that anytime a switch occurred, there would be a snap of a finger. I've never been able to snap my fingers, but the snap would always...
That's the funniest thing you've said so far.
I can't snap my fingers.
I've never heard that before.
Right. Never. It's a curly thumb.
That's
there would be a snap of a finger and then an announcement. 2. The first hologram was called 2. And suddenly I found myself in the presence of something that was very stiff, robotic, and didn't do a very good presentation of him. Around the school kids, it could act corny, kind of pick up some of the Monty Python kind of phraseology, but it definitely didn't seem like Rob. And then my skepticism turned to, is this some incredible acting job?
Right.
as a reminder of the times, this was years before Terminator came along, where that imagery of Terminator being a very robotic, non-human sort of thing had been introduced years later, so it wasn't an imitation. The first time I got my skepticism jarred was I had been writing everything down because he had been telling me things about what it was like to go up to a ship, what they were doing with him, what he was doing with them. And I had this diary that had 5 entries per page, and the thing was only about 5 inches tall, so I was writing about the size of microfiche and taking everything down because I was fascinated, but I was also demanding some sort of proof, like, take me up to a ship so I can see.
Right.
And I got a phone call one day in Rob's voice admonishing me very sternly, angrily, saying, "Do you know what you've done? Your diaries are gone. It's caused a lot of trouble because Rob has gone to retrieve them, and you need to stop writing this down. You're going to get in a lot of trouble." And I ran to my room and discovered that my diaries were no longer in my room, anywhere that I could look, not in my hiding place, anywhere I thought my sister might have grabbed it and hid it. And I was very shocked to discover that they were gone. I went back to the phone. I got yelled at a little bit more, and I got hung up on. I called back. The phone line was busy. I called again. Phone line was busy. So I said, well, I'll have to run over to the Barclays house, which was on the other end of the neighborhood or outside of the neighborhood. And as I started to run out the door, I ran into Rob. Well, this was years before cell phones. The only things we had then were landlines, and he could not have been where he was
on the phone.
And on the phone. So that really floored me. And it wasn't a long time after that that I had helicopters come over my family's front yard for the first time. There were 2 times where a formation of helicopters came over my house. The first time I heard it from a distance, it woke me, and I listened to it approaching for a length of time and wondered why, as it got louder and louder, what they were doing in my town, knowing that the airport was about 25 miles away. And they stopped when they came over the yard and stayed stationary, which was quite a rumbling, and I couldn't understand why, A, nobody in my family woke up, and B, why no neighborhood lights were turning on. But I ended up walking rather dreamlike into the front yard, seeing all the lights streaming into the door.
Did it look like, did they have searchlights? They were looking for something on the ground? Did it look like that?
The light was so intense. The helicopters weren't doing it. The light was so intense that it was just streaming in. It wasn't coming as if a spotlight.
Was it a UFO or was it a helicopter?
Well, I thought it was only helicopters, but when I got to the front yard, and I don't even know why I walked into the front yard, I was trying to see what was going on. But as soon as I walked into the front yard, the helicopters cleared out, and then I could see the belly of a craft. And the craft was so large that it blotted out the sky. It was like a metallic appearing ceiling that covered
the sky,
everything in the sky. It was almost like a high ceiling. There were a few red or cobalt lights, small, and there was a very soft, almost comforting hum to it. And then suddenly I was on the inside of the craft.
Do you recall going up or beaming up, or suddenly 1 second you're on the ground, 1 second you're in the craft? It was that fast?
It was instantaneous.
Wow.
I
Okay.
was kneeling on my hands and knees, kneeling on a sloped, a curvature saucer, like a, I won't say it was the shape of the entire thing because I was looking out a window below me at
Wow.
the roof of the house, the tall evergreen in our front yard. And I was fascinated with that and didn't realize really that I was inside a craft until I heard a voice say, turn around. And I turned around. As I did, the clarity of the window turned metallic. And I was looking at a very tall being that looked as if he was wearing a dentist coat and wearing a very loopy, it looked like a wig. It didn't look right. It had just big loops, almost like a clown wig.
Wow.
And as he spoke to me, I realized it was telepathically because he had a fixed smile. It did not move at all.
Okay. Got it.
And would talk to me and the mouth would not move. So it was communication direct into my consciousness.
Was he like a gray, a reptilian, a Pleiadian? How would you describe this being?
I wouldn't
physically?
say reptilian, and I think Pleiadians are described as being Nordic or very blonde looking.
Right.
And if you were to think very blonde looking, you'd think Rob because he is platinum blonde. The height, I would say, wasn't the sort of height that you read about. Maybe it was in the upper 6 feet, but not the sort of 7 and 8 feet tall that you hear about at times. It was
Okay.
not reptile-like, but it was also appeared as if it was dressed up.
Like trying to appear as human to you in some way?
Trying to appear as human, but not doing a great job.
Yeah, like Bozo the Clown wig. It probably was probably
And,
a giveaway.
and in
Harpo Marx wig.
in Illinois, we have Bozo the Clown. I don't know if it was a national show, but we always.
Oh, I grew up with. Are you kidding? Bozo the Clown appeared at our local dry cleaner when I was a kid. There were lines of kids around the block for Bozo the Clown. Sure.
Now, during the interaction, I saw smaller ones, but they were kind of hiding. It looked like they were very shadowy, as if they had a way to almost make themselves invisible. And it seemed like that was the intent, but it wasn't quite working. I saw stick-like arms and clothing that looked like a monk's robe with a little rope sort of band around the waist holding it together.
Wow.
And kind of cowering behind his leg, only coming up to about hip height on the guy. But he said that he wanted to ask me something and then started to ruffle through my mind, and I objected, saying, no, let me give the answer.
Wow. Okay.
And I heard telepathically, no, we'll get it because you'll convolute the answer.
Wow.
So my mind struggled a little bit like, hey, don't do that. But the sensation of it was much like rifling through a Rolodex.
I was gonna say Rolodex because I actually have and use Rolodexes. That's how old school I am. That's really great. Were you able to have a conversation from your end to this being, or is it all one way, just to you?
It was. I would say that if I thought something, it was clear that he heard it and that it was back and forth, but that would be my first example of a telepathic conversation.
Were you scared to death, or were you like fascinated, or what was? We only have a few seconds. What was your emotion? Would you say?
Strangely calm.
There you go. I've heard that before. I've heard that from other people. All right. She is once again. Lisa, how long would you estimate you were on the craft for?
It is very difficult to estimate time. There was additional interaction where I viewed some sort of a control console, and as soon as I started to look at it and said, boy, I hope I can remember this, it fogged over with a partition that looked like white light. And they said, don't look at that. Guidance, clairaudiently, I was given the information as I was working on the book. I was told that the reason they did that was because it was mind controlled through intention, that I could have messed with it.
Oh, I see. I got you. I understand.
But they had me walk into the center of a larger space, and a tabletop formed, out of which about probably 36 glyphs rose out of it, kind of like those headlights do that open up like that, came out of the surface.
Okay.
And the tall guy asked me to read each one and tell me which one was mine. And as I looked at each one of them, they all conveyed some sort of information to me.
Wow.
And they would resonate more or less until I found the one that I identified as mine. I don't know how I knew to know that. And the tall one was pleased. And after that, it streamed a very brilliant light into my eye, during which I perceived thousands of images, some which I recognized and some which I did not, some which were symbolic, some which were glyph-like, some which were formulaic, and I tried to remember it. I can remember it as impressions, but a lot of imagery went into my pupil, and I found myself in my bed again. And was it the amount of time that it takes to tell this story? I can't really tell you.
It could have been 5 minutes. It could have been several hours. It's really because it was the middle of the night and no one else was up, so there's no way for you to know. Were you surprised Rob wasn't on the ship with you? Because it seems to me if he was on there with you, you'd say, "Oh, I get it," clearly, right?
Strangely, when we walked to school, he didn't say much of anything to me. It was kind of like we were in we didn't really talk about it.
You mean the next day?
The next day, we normally walked to school together.
Right.
And I don't remember ever discussing it, but I was like, ooh, I was on a ship. I did not see him there. And so I didn't actually think I was dealing with the guardians either, which had been explained to me as being protector beings whose format was much like the fabric of the universe, meaning they didn't have a physical form.
Okay.
They had described their intents as being to unbalance the Cold War.
Right.
They were very interested in seeing the United States get ahead in terms of technology advancements, and said that they were using technology downloads telepathically to aeronautics engineers to move us forward, to get us out of the situation where we were really at the ready of launching nuclear missiles, because the Cold War was very severe at that time. Remember when they were teaching us how to hide under our desk from a nuclear bomb?
I'm a few years older than you. I remember it very well. Yeah, there were air raid siren. We had air raid siren drills and things. Yeah.
Oh, we didn't have that. Our high school had.
I'm a few years older than you, so I'm closer to the Eisenhower era than you are.
Our high school had an underground track, and they had it stocked with biscuits and water to supply thousands of people with food for a length of time if it came to that. That's how ready it was.
I know. That's so crazy.
It was a very severe time. So they would tell me, there were times when the holograms would come. Sometimes they would take me for walks at night and show me the night skies and say, look up there. Those lights aren't normally there, And I knew that because my friends and I had always been sky watchers, and there would be 3 dots of light sitting stationary for a length of time when everything else rotated with the motion of the Earth. And after about 45 minutes, the hologram would say, look up again, they're going to move. And they would shoot off in disparate directions.
Wow.
So I knew that when they could tell me that something was going to happen in the sky, that whatever was on the ground walking around with me was connected with whatever was in the sky.
So between when you were with Rob, and one of his holographic copies, and they said 2 or 3 or 4, it was instantaneous, and you never saw a flicker or a hair, like like you see distortion on a TV screen, like nothing at all. It was just he was there, and then suddenly he's number 2.
Finger snap, 10. It got so that there were different iterations, and they would get replaced when there was a problem, and the book goes through some of the problems that came up with the holographs. And there were situations that also came up with visitors who were able or given the gift of being able to take Rob's appearance. They would discuss not only the holographic technology, which would teach me and show me things in the sky before they happened, and they would talk about the utilization of illusion, which is projecting to the viewer that you are perceiving things with your senses. Could be touch, so that if you touch the hologram, you'll get a feeling of warm skin. It could be looking at a commercial looking craft in the sky, and they would say, that's not an actual commercial flight. That's one of ours. We fly low to keep things safe around here because we've got Rob down here, but we can fly down here because we can project to air traffic control at O'Hare Airport that it sees a commercial craft, but it's really us. So they were describing that they did this around Detroit and other areas that had major bases nearby. They also talked about, and this was completely unverifiable to me at the time, was that they said that very often they monitored our military bases, especially nuclear installations,
Right.
and that they would pay visits and knowingly create national security emergencies, knowing that they were causing all the alarms to go off because they were sending a message. And it was part of their plan to let the message that they wanted to get across was, your weapons are an issue to us.
Right, clearly. Yeah, don't use these.
Don't use these.
It will be bad. Don't use these. You were hesitant to share your amazing years with Rob in high school with your family and your friends. Were you ever tempted to just tell everybody everything, or did you just really feel it was a private situation just for yourself?
I was admonished so many times that when the government finds out that there's somebody who knows stuff about UFOs, that I'd be shipped off somewhere, they'd come and get me, and I might not ever get to come back. So they made me very afraid. And if you hear about what happened to people in the military who were on-duty personnel at that time, if they reported something, they were likely to get shipped off as well, or silenced in different ways. So I was very fearful. It created a wedge with my lifelong friends, and I went back to them while I was writing the book and apologized to them and explained to them why I had become so distant during those years. I never felt that I could go to my parents about it because at the time there was still no E.T., the Extraterrestrial. None of these movies like Star Wars, Close Encounters had not happened. None of these movies had happened. There was nothing to compare it to other than Star Trek, which was a fantasy television as far as people were concerned.
Right.
So it was very isolating, and I was fearful. And the first person I ever considered opening up to was actually Robert Hastings, who I met in 1981 during college.
Right. Okay, that's my next question after my next question.
Okay, your next question.
Race, can we see slide number 4? Could jump ahead to slide number 4. All right, so you married Rob, and after you got married, the two of you moved to New York City. You started working in audio, and then you worked in the entertainment industry. You worked with a very famous singing group that you you will not tell me who they are, even though
No, I won't.
even though I've been begging you, you will not reveal it. That's fine. But you and Rob, as a married couple, had a lot of issues, problems, and it was a very, very weird time for you in Manhattan during those years. Give us a feel for your Manhattan era, and then Race, you can take that down now.
The troubles that began were that it wasn't long after we were married that Rob began to deteriorate, and it was a period of years before we started to get a handle on what the symptoms were really. And we were getting into fights about medical care.
Well, work. You worked, and he didn't. You supported him.
He wasn't working. Yeah. He had some jobs, and they didn't last long, and I was wondering what was going on with that.
Right.
I was very stressed out. By the time I got into the music business, that became a 24/7 job, and I do mean really long hours, and even sometimes working till 4 a.m. if it was recording. I did recording coordination, and I didn't understand what was going on here. So I was pressing him to get some gainful employment because I was still an entry-level person. When you're in your early to mid-20s, you're just out of college.
Right.
And it wasn't until I started to threaten to leave that he finally revealed that he was ill. Now, during high school, he had some illnesses that were said to be resulting from radiation exposure of his travels, going to craft. And they would give him antidotes to it, but they were very severe treatments, and they caused him to be hospitalized at one point. Because it was incongruous with what goes on Earth, it looked like he had been poisoned, and I was actually a suspect in that situation at the time, which got me in some hot water with the police for a little while. But he recovered. But after we got married, I asked him to stop doing the work with the Guardians, where they would say that he was doing calculations and helping to work on technology for the U.S. military.
Right.
He was deteriorating. And when I was at the point of wanting to leave, he told me that he was ill and that he was getting medical treatment, but it was through this vigilante organization that he had gotten involved in that was fighting crack. And I was really unhappy about that because, according to him, it was a group of vigilante cops who were fighting crack. Right. And at the time, vigilantism was rampant. All kinds of lone actors were doing things. And so were people on both sides of the law. So not only did I have a very ill husband who soon began to have seizures before my eyes and caused me to have to run home during very busy days to help him, but he started to let me know that we were in deep because he had no interest in quitting. He felt like if he was going to die, which during that era, having seizures was probably a good chance of ending in death, especially if you had a neurodegenerative disease. He said it was myasthenia gravis, but a very severe case. So I was more or less consigned to trying to help him with his illness, but also being intimidated at points in time by people who were frightening me on street corners or letting me know in some way or another they knew who I was, but I didn't know who they were. There was a one situation where there was someone who would watch over our apartment from across a courtyard, and Rob would signal to the guy in the other apartment, and the other guy would signal back, and I knew that they were in cohorts. Right. And he had a direct view into our apartment, so I knew that we had no no privacy. My comings and goings were very well known. And I had confided to a producer friend who I would go to his studio and play music once in a while. But I was talking to him on the telephone, and about 3 days later, Rob came home with a cassette tape and furious and smashed the tape on the floor, quoting me verbatim from what I had said to my friend. So I knew that our phone was tapped and that I was really in some sort of trouble. So,
well, when I read your book, Lisa, your New York era was so interesting because it was you had two disparate lives at the same time. Your work was super exciting. You were in the heart of show business. You were working with a very famous singing group. You were going to concerts and parties and limousines here and there, and enjoying your life and making decent money for a young person in their 20s. And you're in Manhattan, and that was probably a fun time to be in Manhattan. And then you'd come home and
then
your husband would be on the floor having incredible seizures, or he'd be screaming and yelling at you. Didn't he once cut all your clothing with scissors or something?
There were prodromal symptoms, which the pattern was he'd be sullen, he'd be depressed, he'd be nearly catatonic, then he'd start to pick a fight with me. If I didn't engage with him, he would get hostile, and the aggression could turn to violence.
Right.
And I did experience more violence than I care to admit. And when it got to that, he would vomit, and then the seizure would begin. So I began to know the pattern, and that's probably the reason I didn't leave him, besides being told if I left him, I was going to have trouble with these vigilantes.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say, you were an abused spouse. You were an abused
That is
spouse.
true.
You
I
really
do
were.
admit it.
Yeah. Let's jump into the book a little bit. So Christopher O'Brien helped you compile the book. He interviewed you for many days, and he helped you refine your story. Tell us a little bit about who was Christopher. I know he passed recently. Who was Christopher O'Brien?
Chris was a dear friend from when I got to New York in 1983. We worked at the same company, so he was passing through, and given our interest in music, he a keyboardist and me a violinist, we always said we would play music together, and we never did once.
Oh, that's too bad.
But we talked a lot, and he always thought there was something about me, but I refused to tell it to him, just like I didn't tell Robert Hastings either.
Right.
After Robert told me his stuff and Chris told me his stuff, I'd just be like, that's nice.
Well, you're a good person to keep a secret. If I ever have a secret, I'll tell you. You can keep a secret. That's for sure.
Until I write the book.
Listen, everyone writes a book these days.
Everyone writes a book. It's
Chris O'Brien. So tell me
healthy.
about the days you told my friend Matt Barone. You spent days with Chris O'Brien. He interviewed you and refined the story. Some things he was fascinated. Some things he looked at you like, yeah, right, sure, like that.
Yeah, he did. He would tell you if he thought you were being hokey.
Yeah. So that process was like about 5 days or so?
It was, I think it was 6 days. I went out to Sedona, stayed at his house, and we recorded all day long. And we went through the first draft. I call it the barf version. I had so much trouble getting out. This happened. I was frenetically putting it to paper a few years after it all ended. It all ended when Rob attacked me in slicing up all my clothing. I ran away.
Right. And
I swore I'd never go back. Democracy, which was the vigilante organization, or not. And the receptionist at my office shielded me by not letting him get through until one day he got through because she had stepped out to the restroom. And he told me I was in big trouble. And if I didn't go home, democracy was going to come after me. And I said it didn't matter. Either he was going to get me with his hunting knife or they were going to get me with whatever. I was just resigned. The phone call stopped. He had called probably 40 times in one day. it stopped, and I thought, well, he finally gets it. But then I got a phone call in his voice saying it was the Guardians, and I was immediately angry because I thought he was trying to fake me out because we hadn't had any contact with the Guardians in a very long time, not since we were married.
Tell the story, and I know it's a sad story. Rob was shot in the head, right? And he died, but then he came back to life and he was regenerated. So tell us, because that's one of the more remarkable parts of your book.
When the Guardians called me, I was yelling and accusing them of being Rob. And they said, "We know everywhere you've been." They told me everywhere I'd been for a period of days. They told me that I had had a sweetheart that I had never spent any time with, that was unable to be intimate that night because he couldn't perform due to a back injury, which shocked me because I didn't think it possible that a condo that I was given to stay in could possibly have been infiltrated with surveillance with a doorman in a high-rise building in a matter of a couple days. And so I was pretty sure that there was some very advanced knowledge there. And they told me that they needed me to take a reinfused Rob. They had fished his body out of the East River, repaired it, and that they said that they would prove to me that he had been killed. Chris Bryan.
I'm sorry. These are the Watchers.
The Guardians.
The Guardians. Okay. The Guardians said to you, "This is." How did they tell you, on the phone, or how did they communicate with you that he had died and they're bringing him back?
Thanks for circling me back. I get pretty adrenalized when I
No. I know it's such a remarkable story.
I still get biological effects from this, and the telling of it is still not the easiest. I received a phone call at my office in Rob's voice, and I was about to slam the phone down, and they said, "Wait, your life is in danger." They told me what they knew about me, which was everything, and promised that if I agreed to take the re-energized Rob and raise him for 20 months, they would prove to me that he had been killed. And Chris was instantly on the phone with me immediately after that saying, "I don't know what came over me, but I was suddenly compelled to call you." So we had always wondered if he had been prompted by the Guardians to help me figure this out or calm me down.
Okay.
But when I met with the Guardians in the form of number 10, they got into the condo through the elevator shaft, which I had just taken getting home from work, and the thing had shaken so terrifyingly that I thought the elevator car was going to drop. I got in the condo, and a moment later, 10 was at the door knocking and asked to be let in, and I took a deep breath and let him in, and he sat down, took my finger, and put it into the side of his head like this.
Right.
And said, "This is where the bullet went in." And my finger went in this far into bone. There was a hole in the bone.
Okay.
And then switched to the other side and pushed and showed me that the other side of the skull was squishy and that it had been splattered where the exit point of the bullet had been. And at that point, I was really stunned, because when you marry someone, you know what their head feels like. You make love, you rub them everywhere.
Of course.
You know all the bumps on their head, and the hole on the left side of his head was very distinct and deep enough. It was covered over with skin. You couldn't see it, but you could feel it. And it was very shocking to me that it explained what they were telling me about democracy having gotten to him and shot him in the head.
And then you had to essentially, he was an adult child. You had to teach him very basic things for, what did you say, 20 months? You had to,
20 months is what I had to agree to. And
and you did, because you're the most loyal person on the planet Earth.
the regeneration event was overwhelmingly powerful. I nearly passed out from it. Before 10 left, he showed me how to get ready to make sure I covered my eyes because I would be blinded by the energy. It was somewhat like the bomb position. Cover your eyes, don't open them. And I didn't have to see anything. What overcame me was so potent, it was as if a tidal wave was running through my body. And I nearly got knocked over by it. I had to readjust my hands to not get blinded by the energy, but to hold myself up because I nearly fell completely over and I nearly passed out. And then it got quiet in the apartment and I heard a little shuffling, and then I heard a childlike voice saying to me, "You're my grower-upper."
Incredible.
And
it was Rob. It was Rob 2.0, right?
It was a new Rob who took the name Tomar, which had been Rob's warrior name, but took it permanently. And
so from then on, you called him Tomar. From that point on,
we only called him Tomar at that point. Tomar had been used for him as a warrior, but only in that context.
Okay.
And what was amazing was that Rob had issues. He had seizures. He was deaf in 1 year from me defending myself. I hit him on the side of the head, and it had caused him to be deaf for a long period of time. And Tomar, the young one, never had any of those problems. He could hear out of both ears. He never had seizures. He was never violent. He was always cheerful. He was never mean. There was such a change that it was difficult to believe.
And yet at one point you thought he was like Sybil. Maybe he had multiple personality disorder, but you ruled that out.
I did rule it out because of the things which could not have been created by a human being. For example, when our first year of college during the summertime, he was angry at the guardians and they came to get me for a walk and said that he had brought a craft very low to the neighborhood over his house. When we walked back to the neighborhood, there was the apparition that is portrayed artistically on the cover.
Right.
That thing was the size of the World Trade Center, I estimate. It was enormous. It was over Rob's house.
Wow.
And it looked about the size and shape of a World Trade Center with no doors, no windows, and no features, but it was emanating very intense light out of it, probably creating the purple backdrop that you see. This is very, very dark purple clouds, but the sky was otherwise completely cloudless that evening.
Lisa, what do you think that structure was that looked like the World Trade Center building? What was that?
It may have been a craft. I did find a database that talked about rectangle UFOs and they were over I think it was over 1,600 entries of rectangular UFOs going back as early as the 1930s.
You don't think that's a portal?
It could have been a portal. I didn't even think of that.
Because I'm glancing at it now. I'm like, wow, that would be a hell of a portal.
Would you want to go through that?
You know what? If I didn't have my daughter, because my daughter would never forgive me, I probably would. Would. We only have a couple of minutes left. Tell people how they can get your book and how they can contact you if they'd like to talk to you more.
The book is on Amazon, so it's Earth's Secret Visitors, and I put my healing credential behind it because so many people are named Lisa M. Nelson.
Yeah, there's got to be a million Lisa Nelsons on the planet.
But there's only one Lisa M. Nelson, HTCP, which stands for Healing Touch Certified Practitioner. I have an email address of consciousnesswriter@gmail.com. holographic.com. And I do care about people who have a hard time.
Yeah, you're
struggling with questions.
Yeah, you're incredibly empathetic. Do you have? Are you on social media?
I'm on. I have a website. I'm on Facebook. I still have to get some of those accounts.
It's so funny. You and I were both
I
in
do
our
things the old-fashioned way.
We're in our 60s. We're like, yeah, social media. Yeah, okay, I know.
Do I need that kind of attention?
My daughter's like a genius of that. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that's good. TikTok. I don't know.
Not an attention seeker.
So your book is on Amazon, correct?
It is.
Okay. Do you have any plans for any other books or any other projects? Anything else you're doing?
I do have plans for another book. It will be entitled Past Life Lovers, and it is a consciousness journey, very much based on clairaudience, where I discovered I had been meeting people in my present day life that had been part of my past lives. And some of it was a murder mystery because I got murdered. But haven't we all?
I've been hypnotized. I was a mass murderer of women in a past life, and I've heard that from 5 or 6 major psychics. So
You've been a woman.
Yeah, I was like Jack the Ripper before he came along. So that's why my luck with women has never been good. But let's not open that wound.
Oh.
Okay, Elisa, we're going to run out. Thank you so much for doing my dopey show. This was super fun. I loved your book. I recommend everything. And also, Lisa's a member of the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. If you want to join HollywoodDisclosureAlliance.org, join it. We meet wonderful people like Lisa.
You do meet wonderful people.
Wonderful people. Next week, my guest is Melissa Tittle. She's a documentary filmmaker. And that's it. Let's hope the fires stop in LA forever and ever. We've had enough. We've had enough, man. I'll tell you, the last 2 weeks here have been horrible. And that's it. Live from Hollywood, it's Paranormal Tonight. Thank you all for watching. Thank you, Lisa M. Nelson.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. I'll see you next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.